President Lee Jae Myung called his recent U.S. visit meaningful as it allowed him to build a deep trust with U.S. President Donald Trump and reaffirm the robust ROK-U.S. alliance. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will travel to China next week to attend Beijing's 80th anniversary marking the end of World War II in what will be Kim's first international level meeting with world leaders. Russian President Vladimir Putin will be among the 26 heads of state expected at the event. The Bank of Korea kept its key interest rate steady at 2.5% on Thursday over soaring housing prices and household debt. The central bank also upped South Korea's economic growth outlook this year to 0.9%. Upon returning home from a week-long trip, President Lee Jae Myung noted that he's built strong trust with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump and reaffirmed the robust South Korea-U.S. alliance. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
Strong trust was built and the robust alliance was reaffirmed. That was according to President Lee Jae Myung taking to his social media account upon returning home from his week-long trip early Thursday morning. That included the high-stakes first face-to-face meeting with his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump. He said it was possible through a candid dialogue with his American counterpart. He noted that his U.S. trip served to design a sustainable future for the country and share common visions for a secure Korean peninsula and a peaceful world. The president added that the allies' strategic partnership will be bolstered in a host of areas beyond the security alliance to the economy, cutting-edge technology, and supply chains. President Lee vowed to speed up carrying out follow-up measures based on pragmatic diplomacy. His chief of staff, Kang Hoon-sik, shared a story with reporters, saying that he felt that President Trump was treating the South Korean delegation with sincerity, as he took time to sign printed menus for the luncheon and MAGA hats one by one as gifts for the Korean team. Kang added that he had a candid dialogue with his American counterpart Susie Wiles over Trump's controversial message on the summit day. President Trump had bewildered the South Korean team as he posted on Truth Social, claiming that a purge or revolution was going on in Korea, just hours before his talks with the South Korean president. The two chiefs of staff have earlier agreed to establish a hotline communication channel. When it comes to trade negotiations with the U.S., Kang said Korea has overcome a major hurdle, but there's still a way to go, adding that such a trend has become a new normal for global trade. When asked, he noted that the presidential office was aware in advance of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's plan to visit Beijing next week, adding that such developments influenced the Trump summit. Some raised the possibility of a Kim-Trump summit in time for the APEC leaders meeting in South Korea's Gyeongju this October. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
President Lee's first summit with Trump's been considered a success for Seoul's pragmatic diplomacy. It could, in fact, help smooth the road ahead for South Korea's regional diplomacy. Our correspondent, Oh Soo-young, reports.
President Lee Jae Myung's report with U.S. leader Donald Trump underscores his pragmatic diplomacy, potentially easing strains in Seoul's trade and regional affairs. According to Professor Lee Wang-hee, who leads the Asia Unification Institute, Korea has passed its first major diplomatic test as Lee and Trump, in their first summit this week, established a warm relationship. While the results lacked clarity on sensitive trade areas, the summit provided reassurance for Korean firms.
With no joint press conference by Presidents Lee and Trump, there's been curiosity about the outcome. But the July agreement will stand with no changes confirmed. That means much of the uncertainty that had worried businesses has now been eased.
With the two leaders both ready to work together on sectors like shipbuilding and energy, their summit also deepened strategic cooperation, pushing bilateral ties towards a future-oriented comprehensive alliance. Lee's stopover in Tokyo before Washington also set the mood for closer trilateral cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. While some feared this could sharpen tensions with Beijing and Pyongyang, The expert noted the E-Trump summit provided Seoul with clout to pursue regional peace and stability. On North Korea, Trump responded positively to Yi's call for renewed dialogue with Pyongyang, with a potential meeting during this year's gathering of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation members in South Korea's Gyeongju. An early meeting could fast-track progress to diffuse tensions on the peninsula.
President Trump once mentioned building a Trump Tower or resort during talks with Kim Jong-un. If U.S.-North Korea ties progress, constructing a Trump Tower in the north could have major symbolic value. Unlike other projects, it would take less time and could deliver results within Trump's current term.
And then there's China. Amid the intensifying US-China rivalry and unease in Beijing over Seoul and Washington further strengthening their alliance, Trump went so far as to suggest he and Yi visit Beijing together. That reinforced Yi's message that South Korea must not be forced to choose between the US and China, but instead manage both relationships with stability. Seoul's role as a regional mediator is critical. President Yi has invited both Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping to the APEC leaders meeting.
This APEC may center on U.S.-China, U.S.-North Korea, and Korea-China summits. Korea-U.S. relations must go well for Korea-China ties to improve. I believe APEC will prove Korea, U.S. and Korea-China relations are complementary.
Having passed the first test of pragmatic diplomacy, the challenge ahead is whether the Yi administration can turn the momentum into practical progress for regional peace and stability ahead of APEC in October. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is heading to China next week to attend Beijing's Victory Day military parade, while other leaders, including Russia's, are also reportedly participating. Eyes are on what Kim's intentions are. Our Park Kwon-woo tells us more.
Kim Jong-un's unprecedented participation in a multinational event. Confirmed by North Korea and China on Thursday, Kim's set to attend Beijing's military parade on September 3rd, celebrating the 80th anniversary of China's Victory Day.
China and North Korea are friendly neighbors connected by mountains and rivers. We warmly welcome General Secretary Kim Jong-un to come to China.
Kim's attendance will be his fifth visit to China as North Korean leader, but the first time any North Korean leader will have attended the event since 1959, and his first at a multilateral event. So what's behind this move?
Kim has been participating actively in bilateral meetings, but this time it seems like he's showing off as a leader while saying the North isn't isolated diplomatically.
The event is expected to draw 26 world leaders or high-level representatives, including Russian President Vladimir Putin. That means leaders of North Korea, China, and Russia will gather in one place for the first time.
Common interest that is anti-American. So they definitely talk about the United States and they criticize United States. And at the same time, they are going to trying to enhance their cooperation among three countries with some other Chinese-friendly countries too.
Also attending the parade will be South Korea's National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik, representing Seoul. Speculation remains over whether Kim will avoid Woo. But if they get to meet, it would be the first between the two Koreas under the Lee Jae Myung administration, and first since December 2018. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea, the U.S. and Japan have held their first trilateral steering committee meeting since the launch of the Lee Jae Myung administration. Officials from Seoul's Foreign Ministry, the U.S. State Department, and Japan's Foreign Ministry met in Tokyo on Thursday. They agreed on the need to build on the momentum from recent summits and discussed concrete practical measures to make trilateral cooperation more action-oriented and effective. Working-level officials also reaffirmed their commitment to jointly addressing North Korea's illegal cyber activities. At the fourth trilateral working group meeting on countering Pyongyang's cyber threats, some 70 officials shared assessments of North Korea's illegal digital activities, including crypto threats and laundering, and the activities of North Korean IT workers. Also extending their trilateral cooperation to include the private sector, the three sides pledged to pursue effective measures adopted at the conference. The U.S. says it's slapping sanctions on firms and individuals accused of involvement in a fraudulent North Korean IT worker scheme that's used to help fund Pyongyang's weapons program. South Korea and Japan also vowed a stronger joint action. Our Choi Soo-hyung reports.
Those newly added to the U.S. Treasury sanctions list are 2 individuals and 2 firms. On Wednesday, the U.S. sanctioned Russian national Vitaly Sergeyevich Andreev, who helped transfer money to a company under sanctions, and North Korean diplomat Kim Jong-un, who, together with Andreev, carried out several financial deals, including cashing out about $600,000 in cryptocurrency. It also sanctioned Seonyang Kumpunli Network Technology Corporation, which is accused of acting as a front company for the scheme. Also on the sanctions list was Korea Shinjin Trading Corporation, accused of sending instructions from Pyongyang for dispatching North Korean IT workers overseas. The U.S. Treasury says the North continues to use overseas IT workers to hack American companies, stealing data and demanding money through scams. Some workers have implanted malicious code inside company networks to steal proprietary technology and sensitive data. Washington believes the illegal profits from these actions were used to help fund Pyongyang's weapons of mass destruction and missile programs. North Korea has been using fake documents and stolen identities to get remote jobs abroad, and its methods are becoming more advanced with the help of artificial intelligence. In response, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo remain united in their joint efforts to counter the illicit activities of North Korea's IT workers. The 3 countries reaffirmed their commitment to enhancing their coordination and pledged to work closely with the private sector. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
As widely expected, the Bank of Korea on Thursday decided to leave its key interest rate as it is at 2.5%. The central bank also revised up its economic growth outlook for the year for the country this year by 0.1 percentage point to 0.9%. For more, we have our economic correspondent Park Junan here in the studio. Welcome back, Junan.
It's great to be here again, Tammy.
So, Junan, let's start with the central bank's key interest rate decision earlier this morning. Another rate freeze, right?
Right, Tammy. So the central bank announced a continued rate freeze of the country's base interest rate at 2.5% on Thursday morning, after cutting the rate by 25 basis points in May and holding it steady in July. Let's take a listen to Bank of Korea Governor Lee Jae Myung's reason for why he and his agency decided to maintain the base rate.
It's true that an economic stimulus is needed at this point. However, considering the risks, a rapid interest rate cut could bring side effects, such as a hike in real estate prices and increasing household debt that, together with structural challenges, would outweigh the positive impact of boosting the economy.
After the decision, the interest rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. stayed at around 2 percentage points, as the Federal Reserve also kept rates unchanged in late July, citing inflation concerns amid uncertainty from U.S. tariffs. The professor of business also claimed that there was no hurry for decision makers at the bank to lower the interest rate before the U.S. does. Let's listen.
There's no reason for the BOK to make the rate cut decision earlier than the U.S. Fed decision, due to the foreign exchange volatility. Most experts are expecting the rate cut in October. After U.S. Fed decision, Jerome Powell signaled there might be some chances of a base rate cut of the U.S. in next meeting, the September meeting.
So there is no reason for the central bank to rush for a rate cut for now. Also today, the BOK raised the country's GDP growth forecast for the first time in almost 2 years, didn't it?
That's right, Tammy. On the same day, the bank modestly increased its 2025 GDP growth forecast to 0.9%. This is the first time the BOK has raised its growth forecast in nearly 2 years after having continuously lowered it since November 2023. This is what Governor Lee Jae Myung had to say about the revised forecast for the country's GDP forecast.
Domestically, the economic outlook has shown some improvement. While sluggish construction investment continues to weigh on domestic demand, private consumption has maintained its upward trend since June, supported by the supplementary budget and improving economic sentiment. Exports, despite U.S. tariff hikes, have also posted stronger than expected growth, led by semiconductors and automobiles.
In its outlook, the BOK forecasts the country's quarterly growth at minus 0.2% for the first quarter, 0.6% for the second, 1.1% for the third, and 0.2% for the fourth. When asked about the feasibility of achieving a GDP growth rate of 1% in 2025, Lee Jae-myung, Director General of the Research Department at the Bank of Korea's Economic Statistics Department, stressed that it's still achievable.
Achieving 1% range is still possible if growth reaches 0.9% this year. Even a change in the second decimal place would bring it to 1%. We expect a significant rebound in growth during the third quarter, and we will need to see whether the rebound exceeds our expectations. By around November, we should be able to provide a clearer assessment.
It's good to hear that 1% growth rate is still realizable. We are still in August. Juna, now, what did the central bank have to say about how the U.S. tariffs might affect South Korean economy?
All right, Tabi. So although the institution projected a higher growth rate, the looming risks from U.S. tariff still lie ahead. Despite reducing the level of uncertainties after South Korea and the U.S. negotiated the rates at 15% on July 30th, the overall economic impact could come later. According to the BOK report on the impact of U.S. tariffs on South Korea's economy, they could cut 0.45 percentage points of GDP growth in 2025 and 0.6 percentage points in 2026 compared to a scenario where there were no tariffs. The report also noted that South Korea's high dependence on U.S. exports makes the country particularly vulnerable to the U.S. tariffs. It said, while initial impacts have been muted by delays and cost absorption by firms, economic conditions could get worse with global manufacturing orders already contracting.
All right, Juna, thanks for that coverage tonight.
Hope to see you again soon, Tami.
The U.S. government has now identified the shipbuilding industry as a potential sector for equity acquisition, suggesting that it aims to acquire stakes in companies belonging to key industries in order to revitalize domestic manufacturing. Our Yoon-jin has this report.
Following the acquisition of a near 10% stake in chipmaker Intel last week, the Trump administration has now revealed that it plans to obtain stakes in other industries. During an interview broadcast on Thursday, local time, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent responded no when asked whether the government was considering taking a stake in NVIDIA. Instead, he suggested the shipbuilding industry, calling it a critical sector that would contribute to the United States becoming self-sufficient. Given that South Korea has pledged to invest $150 billion in the U.S. shipbuilding sector as part of a partnership dubbed Make America Shipbuilding Great Again, this could have an impact on the Korean economy. While the Trump administration has expressed intentions to acquire stakes in U.S. companies in core industries to revitalize domestic manufacturing, it appears no specific projects have been finalized yet or announced. Meanwhile, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said the key to considering where the U.S. should take equity stakes in companies is whether the country adds fundamental value to the business in consideration. In addition, during an interview on Tuesday, he also mentioned the possibility of acquiring stakes in defense contractors, saying that there was a monstrous discussion about defense. However, to this, Treasury Secretary Bessent expressed doubts on whether stakes in defense companies were necessary, saying that it would need to be seen whether they are fulfilling their mission in terms of providing adequate and timely deliveries to the U.S. military. Such disagreements suggest that further internal coordination is needed, and the Trump administration's decision on government equity acquisitions is still in its early stages. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
The Trump administration has proposed new limits on the duration of U.S. visas. The Department of Homeland Security announced Wednesday that visas for international students, cultural exchange visitors, and foreign journalists could soon face stricter limits. Now, under the plan, student and exchange visas would be capped at 4 years, while journalist visas would be restricted to 240 days or 90 days for Chinese nationals. Visa holders will need to apply for extensions instead of maintaining a flexible stay based on existing programs. Now, in the U.S., 2 children were killed and over a dozen others injured when a gunman opened fire at a Catholic school in Minnesota. Lee Jae reports.
2 children were killed and 17 others injured when a shooter opened fire during morning mass at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis on Wednesday local time. Police say the shooter fired dozens of rounds through church windows just before 8:30 a.m., targeting children and parishioners sitting in the pews. The victims include 14 children between the ages of 6 and 15 and 3 parishioners in their 80s. The 2 children who died were 8 and 10 years old. Authorities say all of the injured are expected to survive.
At this point, we know we have a total of 19 victims from this tragedy. 2 were young children, ages 8 and 10, that were sitting in the pews at Mass when they were shot and killed. They were pronounced deceased on the scene.
Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara added that staff members acted heroically, moving students under pews and helping evacuate them within minutes once it was safe. The FBI identified the shooter as a 23-year-old Robin Westman, who died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the scene. Westman was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, all of which were purchased recently and legally. Court records also show that Westman, who identified as a female, was born Robert Westman. In the wake of the tragedy, Pope Leo XIV expressed his profound sorrow. In a message delivered over telegram to Archbishop Bernard Hebda, the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis, the Pope commended the souls of the 2 children to God and offered prayers for the wounded, first responders, clergy, and loved ones. The shooting took place during a mass as the school entered the first week of the new school year. Lee Jae, Arirang News.
The seasonal clock is ticking toward the end of summer. However, the heat is not cooling down. Daytime temperatures in most parts of the country rose to around 33 degrees Celsius today, and the heatwave warnings have been extended. Heatwave warnings are in effect for 전라남도 and 경상남도 provinces in Jeju Island, and heatwave advisories in the west and most parts of 경상북도 province, including the Seoul metropolitan area. In addition, UV rays will also continue to be high in most parts of the country and very high around the East Coast and West Coast areas. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Busan will start off at 26 degrees, Gyeongju at 23 degrees. Seoul will rise up to 31 degrees, Chuncheon at 30 degrees, Gyeongju and Daegu 35 degrees. Rain will begin to fall in the central parts of the country on Sunday night and will extend to most parts of the country on Monday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.